The late evening sun cast a warm, gentle glow over the airport as passengers boarded Global Air Flight 709, a routine domestic journey that promised smooth air, a soft landing, and nothing unusual. Families settled into their seats, business travelers opened laptops, and children pressed their faces against the windows. Among them was 11-year-old Aisha, traveling alone for the first time to visit her aunt. She was quiet, observant, and carried a small bag, decorated with airplane stickers she had collected with her late father, a brilliant flight instructor. The aircraft, a twin-engine commercial jet, pushed back from the gate and rolled toward the runway. Everything seemed perfectly normal. The pilot's voice soon came over the intercom, warm and confident. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be taking off shortly. Weather is clear, skies are smooth." Aisha smiled slightly. Her father used to say those exact words when he practiced his emergency drills at home. The plane lifted gently into the sky, its engines humming in harmony. But 30 minutes into the flight, the harmony broke. A violent bang shook the aircraft. Passengers gasped as the left engine sputtered, coughed, and suddenly burst into a streak of flame. The oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling. Alarms shrieked inside the cockpit. The flight attendants, trained to stay calm, struggled to soothe panicking passengers as turbulence tossed the plane around like a toy in the wind. Inside the cockpit, Captain Harris and First Officer Reed battled the controls. The warning lights flashed rapidly. Engine failure, hydraulic drop, autopilot malfunction. The captain attempted to restart the engine, but the system refused. Seconds later, another loud sound erupted as the right engine began to overheat. The cabin shuddered violently. Aisha held onto her armrest tightly, her heart pounding. But unlike the other passengers, she wasn't frozen with fear. She watched, listened, assessed. Her father had taught her 4 golden rules in an emergency: breathe, observe, calculate, respond, and she followed them now. The plane dropped hundreds of feet in seconds, causing screams throughout the cabin. Meal trays slid off tables, overhead bins popped open, and luggage tumbled down the aisle. Flight attendants tried to communicate, but the intercom crackled. In the cockpit, the situation deteriorated rapidly. The captain's voice finally broke through the static. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing a critical failure. We only have one safe landing attempt remaining." Those words echoed through the cabin like a death sentence. Aisha's breathing slowed. Her mind raced through every cockpit diagram she had studied with her father, every emergency video, every flight simulation he made her watch. She wasn't a pilot, but she understood airplanes more than any child her age. The plane continued its rapid descent as the crew attempted to call for help, but the radio frequency was weak. "Storm." Captain Harris, already dizzy from the cabin pressure imbalance, collapsed forward onto the controls. His oxygen mask had malfunctioned. The first officer panicked, pushing him back and trying to stabilize the aircraft alone, his hands trembling, his breathing rapid. Then something unexpected happened. A flight attendant hurried into the cockpit and gasped. "The captain is unconscious." "I know," the first officer shouted, trying to restart auxiliary power. I can't hold her steady alone. I need help." But there was no other pilot on board, no backup crew, no chance of outside assistance, and the aircraft had one landing attempt left before its systems burned out. Aisha unbuckled her seatbelt. Passengers noticed the small girl standing up during chaos. Some shouted at her to sit down. Others begged her to stay safe. But Aisha wasn't listening. She was following something stronger than fear, instinct, training, memory of her father. She walked steadily down the aisle, gripping seats for balance as the plane jolted. A flight attendant rushed toward her. "Sweetheart, sit down. It's dangerous." "I need to go to the cockpit," Aisha said, her voice calm but firm. "I can help." The attendant blinked, confused. "Help? Honey, you can't. This is a pilot emergency." Aisha looked directly into her eyes. "My father taught me everything about this model. I know the controls. Please, let me try." Her steady tone, so out of place in the panic, startled the attendant. She hesitated but eventually realized they were out of options. "Stay behind me," she said shakily, guiding her forward. When they entered the cockpit, the first officer's eyes widened at the sight of an 11-year-old girl. "What are you doing here? It's not safe." Aisha stepped closer, her voice unwavering. "I know this aircraft. My dad was a flight instructor. I can help you." The first officer stared at her, torn between disbelief and desperation. His hands were slipping on the controls, alarms screamed, and the plane continued to drop. Aisha spoke again, louder this time. "Please, you don't have time. Let me help." And in that moment, facing disaster, with one landing attempt left, he realized she might be the only chance they had. The cockpit was a battlefield of blaring alarms, flashing red lights, and failing systems. The first officer's forehead glistened with sweat as he struggled to maintain control of the dying aircraft. The plane trembled violently, dipping dangerously toward the storm clouds below. And there, standing beside him, was 11-year-old Aisha, her eyes steady with a confidence far beyond her age. The first officer stared at her for several seconds, torn between logic and desperation. "You're just a kid," he whispered, voice cracking. Aisha swallowed hard. "I know, but right now, I'm the only one who knows what your failing systems mean. My father taught me on this exact model. Please, let me help." A low, painful groan escaped the plane as it lost another 100 feet. The altimeter spun downward, the cockpit lights flickered. The first officer squeezed his eyes shut for a moment, then nodded. "Fine, tell me what you see." Aisha stepped closer to the panels, scanning the warnings with remarkable speed. "Your hydraulic pressure is dropping on the left side. You're fighting the controls too hard. Pull back on the right column, slowly." He did as she said. The plane stabilized slightly, still shaking but no longer plunging. Aisha continued, "Now switch to manual auxiliary. The autopilot's dead, but we can reroute power." The first officer flipped the switches. The aircraft responded with a soft, mechanical click, and the nose lifted gently. Aisha slipped into the captain's chair, her hands barely reaching the controls. But she wasn't trying to take over alone. She was guiding the officer, reading the systems like second nature. The first officer stared at her in disbelief. "How do you know all this?" "My dad, he used to train pilots. We practiced simulations for fun. I memorized everything." Another jolt shook the plane as lightning flashed outside. The storm was getting closer. The passengers in the cabin screamed as the plane banked sharply left. Aisha braced herself. "We need to call the tower," she said. "Tell them we're going for an emergency landing." The first officer grabbed the weak radio and tried to transmit. "Mayday, Mayday, Flight 709, critical systems failing. We request immediate priority landing." Static, a faint crackle, then a voice. "Flight 709, we read you, barely. Say again." Aisha leaned forward. "Tell them one attempt. We only have one attempt left." He repeated her words. The tower responded, "Runway 16 is clear, wind heavy, visibility low, you'll have only one shot." Aisha took a deep breath, her small fingers gripping the armrest. "Okay, we can do this." She pointed at the approach indicators. "Bring us down slowly, no sudden movements. Keep the left side steady or the whole wing could detach." The officer's eyes widened. "Detach?" "If you pull too hard, yes," Aisha said calmly. "Just trust me." The plane descended through thick storm clouds. Turbulence punched the aircraft repeatedly. Rain hammered the windows. The cockpit filled with warning tones. Stall warning, terrain warning, low altitude, sink rate. The passengers clung to one another, praying, sobbing, bracing. A child in the back screamed. A woman whispered verses under her breath. A man held his wife's hand as if it were the last time. But inside the cockpit, Aisha remained the only stillness in a world falling apart. "We're too low," the first officer muttered. "We're sinking." Pull up 2 degrees, no more." He followed her command. The nose lifted, not enough to stall, just enough to level. The descent, The runway lights appeared faintly through the fog, glowing like a distant hope. Aisha felt her chest tighten. That's it, line us up. The plane trembled violently again. A final engine warning blared. The first officer clenched the controls. We're losing the last thrust. Aisha leaned closer, her voice steady and calm, almost whispering. Then we glide, just like my dad taught me. Trust the air, trust the wings. Rain streaked across the windshield. The runway grew clearer, brighter, closer. Flare, now, she instructed softly. The plane's nose lifted slightly. Hold it! Hold it! The wheels slammed against the runway with a bone-rattling crash. Sparks flew. The tires screeched violently as the landing gear struggled to hold. The plane skidded across the soaked surface, sliding dangerously toward the edge of the tarmac. The first officer deployed the emergency brakes. Aisha shouted, "Right rudder, now!" He kicked the pedal. The aircraft veered slightly, correcting its direction. It continued screeching forward, slowing, until finally it stopped. Silence. For several moments, no one moved, no one breathed, no one understood what had just happened. Then the cabin erupted. Cries, cheers, applause, desperate, relieved sobbing. Flight attendants ran to assist injured passengers. Emergency vehicles rushed toward the aircraft, lights flashing in the storm. The cockpit door opened, and medics entered. They carried the unconscious captain out gently. The first officer leaned back in his seat, shaking uncontrollably, tears filling his eyes. Then he looked at Aisha, this small girl in an oversized captain's chair. "You saved 176 lives," he whispered. How did you stay so calm?" Aisha looked down at her trembling hands. For the first time since the chaos began, fear washed over her. Tears welled in her eyes. She whispered, "I wasn't calm. I just kept hearing my dad's voice." The first officer placed a hand on her shoulder. "Your father would be proud." Aisha wiped her tears and looked out at the flashing emergency lights on the runway. She whispered softly to herself, "Dad, I did it." And somewhere inside her heart, she felt the warmth of a hand she missed so deeply, guiding her, just as he always had.